I'm going to pass it over to Alan now to present an award.
Great. I also want to say that today's title from When Railways Were Highways is a line from Jim's poetry. So, it's an honor to Jim. And some of the titles from our previous festivals, there's always a line in there from one of Jim's poems, just for a way for him to guide us. So that's why it's so appropriate. Anyways, here's an opportunity for us to also continue a tradition that ACWW has started over the years, which is the ACWW Community Builders Award. Why don't you talk a little bit about past winners that we've had?
Past winners, well, the first one, as I mentioned earlier, we had recognized Wei Sin Choi, Roy Ma, Joy Kagawa. We kept building, looking at who else is putting things together for the community. And last year, we recognized Bonnie Nish. We recognized Winnie. What's Winnie's last name again?
Winnie Chung.
Winnie Chung. We've recognized Sid Tan for all the things that they do for the community and building. And so this year, we're thinking, who can we recognize? Some names came up. We thought, oh, no, that might be too soon. We're looking at this person. Well, maybe they're not quite there yet. Or are they doing this? Oh, here's another. And then we said, absolutely. This is a person that we know that has done a lot for the community, worked with not only Literation, but also a lot of the literary festivals in Vancouver. She was nominated for the City of Vancouver Prize, and we couldn't think of anybody else other than
Fiona Tinwei Lam. All right.
yes.
Fiona is so well known in the community. So I'll just read a short bio from Fiona. Is Vancouver's former poet laureate and just a couple of years ago, and is the author of 3 poetry books and a children's book, among many other works. Fiona's work also has appeared over 40 anthologies over the years. But I think one of the things that really stands out is during the darkest years of the global pandemic, as anti-Asian racism intensified during deeply painful ways, Fiona, it was you that were among the courageous voices who refused to remain silent through your op-eds and public writing. You spoke whenever there was an audience willing to listen, giving voice to a community in need of witness dignity and solidarity. So you were always there during those dark years when we didn't know how long it would take or if it will ever get out of the pandemic. So during your time as Vancouver's Poet Laureate, you also expanded poetry's reach through community-rooted city poems project, encouraging new poems and poetry projects such as the Tecumseh Elementary School project and collaborative video poetry about Vivian Jung, which is a very important project that invited us into the layered histories of the city and recognition of an Asian Canadian pioneer. So I just want to say these are just a few examples that exemplify why you are such an important person and deserving of the Community Builders Award. Okay.
Yay!
Thanks so much. I'll keep it short because I'm sure your stomachs are grumbling, and we've just heard some marvelous speakers and readers, and we can convene afterwards. But I want to thank the ACWW board so much. I'm so honored and pleased to be acknowledged for this very, very wonderful award. But I also want to thank all the wonderful community builders that have been recognized by ACWW in the past, who helped support and make space for Asian Canadian writers in a variety of ways, whether they were teachers, mentors, publishers, event organizers, cultural leaders. All these people paved the way, just like Jim. And I want to also acknowledge all the present ongoing community builders who are here right in the room right now, as well as those who couldn't make it today. Your dedication and commitment to writing and to writers have played a significant and essential role in creating a supportive environment for writers. And I want to encourage all future, nascent, and potential community builders who are also here in this room right now Whether you are presently writers or artists or not, whether you become a published writer or artist or not, when you volunteer for literation and other literacy, literary and cultural events and festivals, and for literary publications like Rice Paper, and for publishers of books, for cultural boards and committees, when you help out writers as an editor, a publisher, a reviewer, a reader, a buyer of books, a cheerleader, a friend, offering encouragement, writing letters, signing petitions, you make a difference. Each one of you makes a difference. You're helping build the necessary cultural infrastructure that supports more people than you can know right now and for the future. So writing might seem like a solitary endeavor, but we've already heard that it isn't. Obviously, it isn't. There's a stereotype of the loner writer working away in a garret, and yes, some of us do work alone in a garret, but someone has to publish us, someone has to invite us to festivals, someone has to read our work and buy our books, otherwise there wouldn't be a publishing industry. And, it takes a village to build a writer. And what that village looks like might differ for every particular writer. It might be a couple of teachers who've cheerleaded you on. It could be a Rice Paper magazine. It could be another literary community. It could be a writing program somewhere. But all those things create a tapestry of support. And I want to talk just very briefly about racism. I wrote 3 editorials about anti-Asian racism during the pandemic, and that kind of scapegoating is always there under the surface. Scapegoating exists for any particular group at any particular time, and I think we need to work in solidarity as Asian Canadians with our Indigenous fellow residents, with Black Canadians, with anyone who, trans, queer, who is being marginalized and blamed, unfairly blamed, because it'll rotate and it'll eventually come back to us. So we need to create a community, a network of people who will stand against racism, against any ism that is unfair and unjust. And together, we will be able to stand strong and create a community that will be resilient and mutually supportive. And I think of Vivian John. Yes, she was the first Chinese Canadian teacher hired by the Vancouver School Board in 1951. But she didn't just sort of pop up and get hired and boom, become a mentor. It took a whole lot of people to support her, to allow her to exist and become the kind of leader that she became. It took her father, it took her sisters who stood up against a principal who said there's no way that any school board would ever hire a Chinese Canadian teacher. So don't even bother sending your daughters to teachers' college. They supported her and they helped her go to teachers college, financed it here. And then it was a coach, a swimming coach, and her classmates, all white allies, who said, we need to help Vivian get that life-saving certificate to become a teacher, that she needs to be a phys ed teacher. And then it took the principal of the school at Tecumseh to hire her, a white teacher, and she was the only non-white teacher. And she became a role model for all kinds of kids of all backgrounds, basketball, baseball, grade 4, grade 5, grade 6. So we all have a role to play, and we all have a role and a part. Even if it's small, we think it's small, but it has great ripple effects. So I'm honored and proud to be one community builder, but you all are community builders too, or have the potential to be community builders. And I look forward to sitting in the audience and applauding you. But thanks so much to Literation and to everybody here. Thanks so much to Jim Wong Chu, who included me. It was my second anthology out of 40, but it was a very big moment for me, a very special book, and for many other 50 poets in there. So have a good evening, everybody, and thanks so much for this wonderful honor.
Frame here, we designed it around rice paper as our theme here.
What I'd like to show you right now is a very new poetry video. I started as a poet laureate for Vancouver in 2022, and my City Poems project was to encourage people to engage with history, culture, and ecology of the city through poetry and poetry videos. And this poetry video was something that I worked on with a group of students in grade 5 and 6 at Tecumseh Elementary in East Van. And they all wrote poems about Vivian Jung. Who here knows who Vivian Jung is? Okay, some of you. She was this young woman who wanted to become a teacher, and she needed to get a life-saving certificate in order to become a teacher. But there was a ban on Asians and Blacks to swim at the Crystal Pool, both the Crystal Pool in Vancouver and the one in Victoria. But what happened when she was barred from the pool is that her coach and her fellow students protested with her to let her be admitted, and then she was. And the color ban, after some other protests that followed, ended that ban, and she became a teacher, the first Chinese-Canadian teacher hired by the Vancouver School Board. She was hired in 1950. And she stayed at Tecumseh for 35 years, and she was an incredible teacher who was an award-winning coach for volleyball and field hockey and basketball teams there, and was quite a role model for many students and for other student teachers. And she is remembered through the students' poems that I worked on with them. And what I did was I took lines from each of those student poems and turned it into a collage poem or a cento poem, and then into a poetry video with the help of a videographer friend.
At the segregated crystal pool, crystal clear waters, crystal clear rules, shimmering, shining pool of dreams for those of the right race. The Parks Board permitting only 2 hours a week for Asians and Blacks to swim.
It started small, like a bright star shining. Vivian waited in line, ready to learn, needing a life-saving certificate to become a teacher. Pool staff tried to turn her away. You can't enter here, but she knew she was right. Born in Merritt, BC, she too had sung "O Canada" all her life.
Her coach and fellow students refused to enter the pool without her. Those friends, those allies, fighting for the rights of all Asians and Blacks, united in courage, the courage to say, "We are equal." They didn't back down. Doors that were closed were then flung wide open.
Diving board springing, unfiltered laughter, splash. Vivian jumped off the diving board into refreshing freedom, into equality so clear and clean. The pool, gleaming, sparkling, glittering, now accessible to everyone.
Imagine the pride she felt. Exclusion from pools no more. When she broke the color ban, she broke down rigid minds, made a whole city know she was right, and swam into teaching for 35 glorious years.
What a wonderful teacher she would become, an inspiration. First Chinese-Canadian teacher hired by the Vancouver School Board, coaching girls' volleyball teams to city championships, sharing her love of softball, dance, and phys ed at Tecumseh Elementary for decades.
How do we solve inequality? Thank you, Vivian and allies, for showing us the way.
So it's so great hearing those students' voices. They really got into it when they were reading the poem. So I wanted to show you another poem that I did. It's what's called a blackout or erasure poem. And what I did was I took a document, a restrictive covenant, which is like a special contract on property, which prevented owners, white owners of property in West Vancouver, Vancouver Island, all through the province and through the country, from allowing Asians and Blacks to own property. And it's still registered on property in many, many places, and people don't know about it. Of course, it's of no force and effect as of 1978, when legislation was passed to make it null and void. But these provisions were trying to create and disempower Asian Canadians, blacks, from owning property. And so I wanted to re-empower us as Black, Indigenous, and Asian Canadians to say that we do belong. So I took the provision of that restrictive covenant, which basically said, no poultry, swine, sheep, cows, cattle, or other livestock shall be kept on the premises. No person of the African or Asiatic race or of African or Asiatic descent, except servants of the occupier of the premises and residence, shall reside or be allowed to remain on the premises. So it's trying to enforce a certain kind of segregation. Very similar to the kind of exclusion that was happening with the Exclusion Act, as you see in this exhibit here. So what I did is I took those two provisions, copied them 5 times, and then circled certain words, and then erased the other words with my mom's Chinese watercolor brush and ink. And I created this poem. No other, no race, all allowed. Africans, Asians, all shall reside, all shall remain. All shall allow, all to remain. So it's just a way that maybe you might want to write poems of your own to subvert exclusionary, restrictive, hurtful language into something positive.